So now that we have Liferay installed, or maybe you're going through the lectures, let's talk about what an asset is and a little bit more about the asset framework. Now, an asset is a term that we use to kind of encompass or grab all of the different types of content. So every type of content within Liferay is considered an asset. Sometimes when we talk about it, in person or colloquially, we use the terms interchangeably. But just know all of the different types of content within Liferay are considered assets. So the analogy that I like to draw is just as circles, squares, and triangles are shapes, right? Things like blog posts, wikis, and web content are different types of assets, right? And so just as the analogy with shapes, where different shapes have things in common, like all shapes have an area, they have a perimeter, and you can do some complex math with that. Assets within Liferay also have a couple of commonalities as well. With assets, all assets within Liferay are able to be tagged. Tags in Liferay are kind of like hashtags, right? Adding specific keywords to the content or the asset to be able to better sort and search for the asset that you have in mind. Categories is another way in which we're able to add keywords to our assets, but it's done a little bit differently. We'll touch upon that a little bit later. And commenting with any asset or with any content within Liferay, you can add comments to it. Easy things, right? This is an HR document. This needs to be updated, whatever the case is. With the asset idea in mind, we have a whole framework for our content or for our assets. With this framework, it helps us really to better sort, search, and manage our content throughout Liferay, right? As the amount of assets grow and grow and grow, right? You need specific methodologies and tools to kind of help you out with that. And that's what the asset framework is used for. Now let's talk about different types of content or different types of assets. Now the star of the show throughout Liferay has always been just standard web content. Web content can be as simple as just plain text or as complex as text with some images in a specific format. With web content, you can make it right as simple, as complex as you need it to be with the editor that is provided for you. Documents and media is kind of the number two. As we add files from our computer or from the internet into Liferay, we can incorporate them as what we call documents and media. So for now, documents and media are the things that we upload into Liferay. Right? Add your images, add your PDFs, add your videos into Liferay. They're typically going to be stored or expressed as documents and media. Find a cool site that you want to save. You got bookmarks there, just as you would in your browser. Blogs, again, is a very powerful tool right now in the world of modern sites. It's a very easy way to be able to communicate and convey ideas to whomever in a very simple and kind of business casual-like manner, as I like to say. Liferay has a very robust tool set to be able to create the blogs exactly as you need them to be. A couple of other assets, not exactly the heavy hitters, but still pretty cool nonetheless. You have wikis here within Liferay, the idea that you can have your users collaborate together, right? Use a crowdsource approach to get as much information as you can. Message boards, right? It's kind of like an asynchronous conversation, right? Someone may post a question and then your users can post responses to them. Forms, right? If you need to create a form to have your users fill them out, right? You can do that within Liferay. And finally here, polls, right? If you need to gather opinions or ideas from your users, you can use polls to do that. Do you hear Laurel or Yanni, right? Is the dress blue or gold, right? Obviously, you're probably going to use some more business-like use cases, but very simple examples there. Let's jump back and again talk more about assets. Just as with the shapes analogy, assets have a couple of different things in common. We already talked about how you can add specific keywords through tags and categories, but let's also talk about some other things that you can do with assets that are common throughout all of our different assets. First off, assets can be managed by folders. We're pretty familiar with folders on our operating systems. They function very similarly here within Liferay. Instead of having individual content scattered all over the place, right, you can store them within individual folders and then organize those folders accordingly. Another aspect here with assets is the ability to relate them, as we like to say. This is literally linking one asset to another. So let's say you have a photo album and you want to be able to link all of the different photos together. So photo 1 can link to photo 2, photo 2 can link to photo 3, and then so on. Another example I like to give is blog posts. You may have seen in the past with Liferay's blog posts, some people like to make a series. So let's say, I want to make my blog post part 1, and then I make part 2, right? Maybe you see part 2 and you want to go back to part number 1. With relating assets, this can be very simple. As I create part number 2, I can then create a link between part 2 and part 1. Or in Liferay terms, we can relate blog post part 1 with blog post part 2. That's the idea here of relating assets together, right? You can seamlessly go from one to another. We talked about commenting, right? You can add comments to any asset within Liferay, whatever that comment may be. But you can also do more than just that in the commenting world. You can, of course, reply to comments. You can also rate assets. You can subscribe to assets. Kind of feels like YouTube a little bit. And you can also flag them as well, right? If you feel like content is inappropriate for whatever reason, you can flag it. Admin will then take care of it. And then probably the most important here, while all of these are very useful in the asset management, content management world, the last one here is the idea of permissioning. We have such fine-grained control over who can access what sort of assets. We have so much power there. To me, it's very, very cool. It's very customizable. You can make people see one thing, but not another, see that thing, but not this. You can make them be able to edit that, but not this, right? So much you can do in the world of permissioning. Now, a lot of what we're talking about is more or less the same in previous versions of Liferay. So if you're coming from 6.1, 6.2, 7.0, you might be thinking to yourself, hey, Eddie, I get it, I got it. We've been doing this for years and years and years. And I feel you on that, right? But here in Liferay 7.1, we have a couple of new tools as well that helps us with the creation of content and displaying that content. So a couple of tools we're going to be covering here are page fragments, these things called content pages, and modern navigation tools. We'll be covering those in great depth pretty soon, but let's talk about what are some of these different things. Let's start off with page fragments. Now again, traditionally, we've always done the create content at a site, display it through a widget or portlet or application if you come from different versions, right? That's been traditional. That's how things have been for a very long time, and they're still like that today. But we also have these things called page fragments. This ties together with what we call content pages. What a page fragment allows me to do is work directly on the page itself and then design the page how I want. If I want a header with a specific banner and then a middle part, with an image of, some of my employees pretending to work in the background, and then a footer with, some logo and things like that, I can do all of that within page fragments. So I mentioned 3 different distinct parts. Each one of those parts can be expressed as a page fragment. So let's give a more formal definition of the page fragment. What a page fragment allows us to do is use our big 3 in web development, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, to be able to create a piece of our page, right? So again, maybe I want to create that header. I can use my big three to make the header, to add an image, and make it look really, really nice. Add some text there, and then I'm good to go. So it does take a developer to set that part up. But once that part is set up, you can then use it for whatever you need. Maybe you want a different image in that banner. Swap out the image. Maybe you want different text, right? And maybe instead of saying home, you might want to say welcome. Swap out the text. So what makes a page fragment really, really cool is once it's in your hands, right, you can add it as many times as you want to the page, and it gives you the flexibility to customize it, right? You're gonna have whatever it is that's given to you, but you have a lot of flexibility as to what that's gonna look like. One of the things here is that when we're creating fragments, we typically wanna group them together. So again, maybe I have 3 fragments that help me build my welcome page or my landing page. Maybe I want to group those together. Or maybe I'm using different banners across different sites or different pages. I may want to group all of the banners together or all of the footers and so on. So again, formally speaking, fragments are reusable content that we are able to customize, right? From there, very reusable, very easy to edit, very easy to create our pages. If the idea is a little bit hazy right now, that's okay, no worries. Once you see it though, I'm convinced that it's really cool. So I'm pretty sure you're gonna get that same impression as well. Modern site navigation. Now, again, we're ushering in kind of a new age of sites. We call them modern sites. And with that, navigation is not as straightforward as it used to be. Back in the day, it's really much, drop down, go here, right? Click another drop down, go there. All of your navigation is kind of laid out for you, and it's pretty linear. But now, today, navigation can be really complex, right? You might click a link that sends you to a completely another site. That other site might send you somewhere else, right? Who knows, right? Depends. So with all of these ideas in mind, we have a way that we can better manage and better configure the way the flow of the site is done and how it's going to be displayed back to the end user. And so with that, we have a tool called Modern Site Navigation. So with Modern Site Navigation, this allows us to create a lot of different navigation menus and create a link between all of these different pages, all of these different menus, all of the different content that you might have on the pages. So with that, let's take a look here, the content management paths summary. So let's hit these bullet points here, again, emphasizing those gray areas there. Not, fuzzy, but gray on the screen. So we defined assets as different types of content in a site. There are many different kinds of assets available on the platform. We saw 2 different lists, right? Those heavy hitters on the first one, and then ones to be aware of: web content, docs and media, blogs. The asset framework allows users to manage, organize, and present content effectively. We talked about how we can add keywords, tags, and categories. We can comment, rate, subscribe, flag, and relate content together. So this is the idea here of the asset framework and assets themselves. We're going to spend some time a little bit later actually getting to play with those ideas. But for now, just kind of laying the foundation of what these things are so that when we see them, we can have a better appreciation of them as they're coming up. Right, so let's go ahead. We'll be progressing on to the next part.